All right. Hey, it's been a while since I've streamed, so thank you guys for coming today. I really appreciate it. Um, so today we're going to be talking about how to cope with grief. Um, oh, I got a new follower. Ant the Mood. Ant the Mod? Is that how you say that? Thank you for the thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. And hi Louie. It's always good to see you. Um, yeah, so today we are going to be talking about coping with grief. Um, this stream is in memory of Aaron Beilstein. Um, I would always joke that his name is Aaron Beilstein, not Aaron Beilstein, because it's a German name. I'm going to be sharing memories about him during this to sort of keep my composure. It's going to be hard, but I'm really glad for all of you that could make it to this. I'm really hoping that it helps people who are going through grief. Um, and yeah, um, the thing that I learned about grief is that your journey in grief is unique. Blue Lantern Gaming, thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. Also seeing a little animated dinosaur in the middle of me getting sad cheers me up. Aw, thank you. Aw, oh snap, hype train. Well, that's a thank you for cheering me up. I appreciate it. Um, so, uh, your journey in grief is unique. It's unique to you, and the things we talk about today. Some of you might think, you know, that really resonates with me, or you might think that doesn't really speak to me. That's not something that's for me, and that's okay. Um, or maybe I'm hoping that some of the things you might be willing to try and hope that you find helpful in your journey. Or maybe it helps you understand why you're feeling blank. You know, uh, but either way, that's okay. Dealing with the passing of a loved one is a process, and it involves a lot of self-discovery. Um, and it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have good days. It's okay to not feel anything yet or not be able to express it yet. I have to keep checking in my camera. I had a backup plan for this. Got my shades. um, so, uh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little rusty. It's been a while since I've streamed and there's a lot going on, so I appreciate you guys being patient. Um, but in what ways do you relate to um, your emotions not showing up when you feel like they should be present? Since we're talking about, you know, some people might experience grief and they might not feel anything yet, and they might think, why am I not feeling this? And get that guilt of, why haven't I cried yet about this? Why haven't I felt this yet? Um, but the thing is that's okay to have that and not be able to express it yet. And people don't get told that enough. Um, so in what ways do you guys relate to, um, you know, your emotions not showing up whenever you feel like they should be present? Because it's a common thing. Um, the initial shock that you experience in the passing of a loved one. Oh, I just saw your comment. Thanks, Louie. Yeah, I'm proud of the shades. um, but uh, I lost my place for a second. Um, oh, Louis says the first time I dealt with heavy loss was my grandpa's passing, and I didn't used to understand why I didn't feel anything at his funeral. I saw everyone crying and felt nothing. And weeks later, I started crying out of nowhere. Um, Sir Norville S. Rogers said that it's the hide the hurt hearts. I love that. um, yeah. Um, but Louis, yeah, what you experienced, there's a name for that. It's called delayed grief. And it's not uncommon. And it doesn't take away from the love that you have for that person. Um, it doesn't take away the fact that you're mourning them, or the fact that you know that you're processing it. You're trying to understand and come to terms what's happened. Um, and you don't deserve to beat yourself up for not having gotten to that point yet, you know. Let me get some water. Uh, so we're going to be talking about the types of grief, including delayed grief, which we just talked about. Um, and we're gonna learn about a lot of other types of grief, and you're gonna see that in all of this, you're not alone. Um, so we'll be talking about the 7 stages of grief, uh, to bring some level of predictability to what you might experience, or give context to what you're already or currently experiencing. We're gonna be talking about ways to cope, uh, and ways that you shouldn't cope. Maladaptive versus adaptive. And lastly, we'll talk about ways that we can help ourselves, help each other, and our friends grieve, because we're all in this together. And it will be, like I said, talking more about Aaron. Um, but what are some things that you already know about grief or coping that has helped you? And while I wait for your guys' responses, I'm gonna check out the chat. Oh, okay. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Um, but yeah. Um, as far as I'm interested to hear what you guys already know about grief or ways that you've coped, especially if you knew Aaron. We're all in this together, just how we're processing this. But even if you didn't, or even if you didn't experience the death of a loved one recently, or that's not something that you're relating to, grief takes all forms. You could be grieving a pet, you could be grieving a job, you could be grieving a relationship. So this will be applicable to anybody going through that type of hardship where they've lost something that meant a lot to them. Um, Also, I just saw your message, Sir Norville, that your grandpa passed away 6 years ago from lung cancer. I didn't see him very often, but I cried as soon as I saw the deteriorating. Yeah, and you're not alone in that either. Having that relationship with a family member where maybe you don't see them very much, but it doesn't mean that it hurts any less, especially when you see them suffering. Um, that makes it harder. I'm sorry. Gonna put on the hide the hurt hearts, and now I feel cool. Um, so uh, some things I learned is there's no timeline on grief. A quote that I really liked, according to professional counselor Trudy Griffin, in response to how long grieving takes. Grieving is an individual process that may ebb and flow over a long period of time, depending on how one copes. If someone is allowed to grieve freely, it takes less time than someone who suppresses it. So I hope today we can allow ourselves to be open and expressive and here for each other, even though I'm saying this while wearing Hide the Hurt Hearts, and also share in the memories of those that we've lost. Um, I was just checking the chat. Oh, Louis says it helps people to know that people process grief in different ways. When I tell people I don't always know when those emotions will turn on, they always meet me with compassion. I mean, it helps me. Um, yeah, I think that's good that you surround yourself with people who are empathetic and understand what you're feeling. I think people's initial reaction when you tell them, "Hey, I'm going through this," is, "Oh no, it's okay. It's okay." They want to comfort you. And the thing is, like I had to go into work the day after Aaron died, and my one coworker was like, "Oh, he wouldn't want. I mean, he's younger. He was like he wouldn't want to see you sad. He wouldn't want to see you feel this way." And it's like, well, yeah, but it's like that doesn't make it feel better in that moment. It's okay um to still feel that and to have people that understand that and who are patient with your grieving. Um, it's important to have that kind of support. Huh, Buckles? I know you were very supportive in my grieving, huh? Um, VI Falcon says, shades are so appropriate. I've had a hard time in the past worrying if I was grieving in an appropriate way. Like when my grandpa, or sorry, when I'm reading through the makeup in my eyes. Oh, sorry, Buckles. Am I talking too loud in your ear? Okay, this actually burns. One second. I told myself I wasn't gonna wear makeup for the stream because I knew that this was gonna happen, and like I knew that this was gonna like burn my eyes, but um, this is why we have the glasses. um, like when my grandma passed away, she was in the hospital for a long time, so I had to accept that she would pass away before it actually happened. And I felt like I just had to keep worrying about school and my daily life. Yeah, that actually is another form of grief is delay or anticipated grief. Um and that's a really great point. And I think we're gonna touch on a lot of things like that today as far as um these types of grief that seem less common, but they're not. It's like it makes sense that when you see somebody deteriorating, you already know, okay, this is gonna happen, and it's weird because you're grieving the fact that it's gonna happen, and then when it happens, it it can be like you're grieving it all over because you know I don't know if that was your experience, and I'm interested to hear, Vi Falcon, if that resonated with you. As far as I'm interested also in what you said about you had to keep worrying about school and your daily life. Do you mean like you were afraid that worrying about this would take away from what else you were experiencing, or do you feel like are you saying like on top of all that it was just like too much? Or I'm interested to hear what you like more about that. And Louis says, I relate heavily to VI Falcon. When my grandpa was sick, I didn't visit because of school. I didn't do well that semester anyways, and I felt like I made the wrong choice. I still live with that guilt. I know that nothing I say is gonna make you forgive yourself or feel better um with that, but just know that, and you already know this, but you did the best that you could with the information that you had at the time. At the time, you were like, okay, I have to focus on school. I'm being given this opportunity. This is my future. I have to put forth this. And I don't think your grandpa, I mean, you knew him. I don't think your grandpa would have wanted you to stop school. It's unfortunate that you didn't do well that semester, but that doesn't take in vain the fact that you pushed yourself and you tried, because I mean, school is fucking hard. Like the fact that you did that anyway while going through what you did, I mean, you deserve credit for that. Um, it's Moki. Did I say that right? It's Moki. Or mochi. I think it's mochi. Well, yo back. Hi. um Louis the Claw says, "Thank you for that shorty pop. That means a lot." And you're so right. The second one. Mochi? Okay. There's a ferret channel I follow on YouTube where one of the ferrets is named Mochi, so that's why I know that. um, so cool. um, so yeah. I'm looking at my notes to see where I'm at. Oh yeah. So as some of you know, our dear friend Aaron Beilstein, or in Twitch chat, because he was part of the Shorty Pop family. The lake has passed away, so today's stream is in honor of him. And as we'll get into, writing this stream has been a constructive help for me personally in my journey of grief. And like other ways of coping, we'll learn about in the stream. One takeaway I gained in writing this was that I want to create new experiences and new traditions and new connections and new ways to celebrate his life. Um, so, what were ways that you've celebrated somebody that you care about that you've lost? And Also, who comes to mind when you think about your experiences in grief? I know people are talking about, their grandparents and things like that. And I'm curious if you guys have created traditions or found ways that you've celebrated their life um, after they passed, as a way of helping you cope and keeping their memory alive. Um, Even if you didn't know Aaron, you may, like I said, be experiencing your own forms of grief. Um, Grief is something that we'll experience over and over. Um, and that's why I think it's so important to learn about this, to learn what grieving consists of, because since this is something we'll go through over and over again, in order to overcome something, you have to be able to understand it first. And I think that this is going to help. Um, uh, oh, for like a split second, I thought I deleted all of my notes, and I was going to be like, oh, okay. um, but, I feel like I didn't. I'm reading Vi Falcon's comment. I feel like I didn't have time to truly process how I felt because I felt a pressure to do what was expected of me as a high school student, and I didn't have the emotional intelligence to even understand how I felt in the first place. Yeah, I think that goes in line a lot with about grief being something you experience over and over. You know, you didn't understand how you felt at that time. And um I know when we talked about when Aaron passed, there was we were both still trying to figure things out. Um and going through that at a younger age is, I mean, going through grief as an adult is hard enough, but going through it when you're younger too, and you don't have somebody who, you know, you have your family, you have certain people that you can go to talk to, but I think whenever you get older and you have more of a network of friends that you can talk to about this and get this insight, I'm wondering, do you feel like Vi Falcon, do you feel like you have learned to handle grief better now than you did when you were younger, like through your experiences? And Louis the Claw says, I celebrate Aaron by getting back into Melee, which sounds a little silly, but I think about that gathering in his honor, and I remember that I really thought about doing a call with somebody for this instead of just doing it all on my own because I thought it might be hard for me to get through this stream because it's live and I can't just yeah. But anyway, for those of you who don't know, we play this game, Super Smash Brothers Melee. Aaron loved that game, and he was one of the best Zelda players in the world. Um, Again, look up the lake if you ever want to check out his work. But after he passed, we did a Melee tournament together. We all got together and we all played video games, and then somebody even had a party at their house afterwards where everybody, you know, played Smash because it was something that he enjoyed. And Louis, you've actually been teaching me how to play, and that's something I've been doing too to celebrate Aaron. Is, I know all of you play this game, and this is all something that you had in common. That's how you met. That's how a lot of you met Aaron, and getting to be a part of that. Um, I don't think that's silly at all. So, I mean, regarding your comment, Louis, I don't think it sounds silly at all to want to do that. And you said, I remembered that great community that was connected through him. What makes me want to play the game more than others is the brilliant community connected through him. And you said, you're doing great, Shorty Pop. Thank you. Um, uh, yeah. Normally I'm better at streaming, but I feel like my mind's just like all over the place. My schooling got messed up before. Sir Sir Norville S. Rogers said, my schooling got messed up before and after my grandpa died. I struggled through high school, was already. Oh, oh. I thought there was more. I thought it got cut off for a second. Um, okay. Yeah, whenever we go through grief, it's hard for life to go on in other aspects, I couldn't work, you know. It's just it's hard to have to deal with other life things because there's stuff that it's like you just want to put a pause on it and take a break and just be able to have that time. But especially as a student, it's like, you know, it's hard to get to call off school because you're sad, if your parents don't let you or whatever, or getting behind in school, that affects you. Um, no matter like any instance, whenever you have to deal with school or work or other life stuff while you're trying to grieve, it can make it hard to do both. It gets in the way of each other. So that makes sense that you struggled with that. Um, Also, first time chat from Sapphire Nightmare Blade. Oh, I like the name. Um, it's been a tough year for me in terms of loss. Lost two close family members with little warning. Bluntly speaking, they were old. They were difficult losses, but Aaron is the first peer relation I've had who has passed, and I've had a very hard time with it. I don't know, the desire for things to be different and not being able to make sense of why things are the way that they are has been very intense. Um, and I saw your, uh, I'm trying to respond to one person at a time, but yeah, that's something that I'm really hoping that what we talk about today, um, I'm hoping that it helps make sense of it because, I mean, when I when somebody uh had first told me that Aaron had passed away, I like my first reaction was like I didn't believe it at first, and then I got angry because it felt like who would come up with this lie? Like somebody had to just say this or something. There's no way this it's true, and I just felt it felt like a bad acid trip. Um, I get why it makes sense why it's hard to pick up the pieces after that, and why it's hard to make sense of everything. You know, he was he was young. Um, Johnny Gamble says, I had the same reaction, disbelief and anger that someone would say that. Thank you for saying that, actually. That's really validating to know because I did feel bad that I felt anger. I didn't, lash out or anything, but I felt bad for thinking that anyone would lie about it, but I just felt it was just so much. Um uh Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, I remember Hunter broke it to the Melee group chat. I remember being like, who the hell is Zapdos? What Discord is this? Who does he think he is to say this? Obviously, it ended up being true, but yeah, Gumball said it was all disbelief and anger. Yeah. Um, yeah. No, I don't think anybody really saw this coming. Oh, Gumball, Johnny Gamble. Oh, okay. um, I remember making that connection whenever I found out his name was Johnny Gamble, and then knowing his Smash name was Gumball. I was like, is it? Is it because of that? um, but yeah, and that anger, that's also a part of grief, that's it is normal. Uh, I'm trying to I want to make sure I don't forget to tell you guys anything, but I wanted to let you guys know, if you didn't have the pleasure of knowing Aaron, or if you just want to hear his voice again, um, you can check out my interview in my stream archive, Compassion in Nursing Homes, as he spoke on how to help pick the best places for our parents to go someday, because it or our grandparents, because that's a decision we might have to make someday. Um, and he also talked about finding compassion for people, even at the expense of yourself, because that's the embodiment of who he was. He constantly put others before himself. um, I rewatched that stream after I found out he had passed because I just wanted to hear his voice again, and there were so many times where I watched myself and I just thought, shut the fuck up, Danny, and let him talk. Or there were times I felt like I just could have done better at interviewing. Like I felt like I treated it too much like a stream and I didn't listen to him as well as a friend whenever he talked. I want to be more in the moment with people because I feel like I missed out on certain moments that I could have kept in my memories for longer if I'd been more there at the time. And I had that guilt whenever I rewatched the stream because I felt like, yeah. Um, VI Falcon says, I found out through Reddit of all places. Really? Really? I didn't know that. I too had disbelief, but also regret and anger that I hadn't reached out to him more. It feels like I had forever to meet up with him, and looking back, we did try, but I do wish we watched Gargoyles together, like we always said we would. I'm gonna blow my nose, but I'll put up the mic so you don't hear it. And I'm just going to put that on my desk right there because I don't have a trash can in here. So you can't see it, but that just happened. Um, looking back, we do try. I wish we. Oh, and I will certainly do that in his honor at some point. Yeah. Um, and I think that's great too. You're turning something into um like you're to be able to take that and say, you know, we didn't get to do this together, but I want to make this something that I can do in the future. I think that's good. I'm doing the same thing. Um I wanted to watch The Black Phone with Aaron. I even like I looked back through our messages to when I invited him to it, but he had too many health problems and doctor's appointments. I mean, I didn't realize how bad his health problems were, which I felt guilt about too. I just knew he had like some doctor's appointments, but I just thought, you know, you just think everything's gonna be fine. Um, and Aaron really, he didn't want people to see him sick. He didn't want that, and he withdrew from people. So even if you did try to make plans with him and they didn't work out, or you weren't able to get a hold of him, just know that it wasn't anything personal and that we all tried to reach out to him. You know, even though I tried to make plans to hang out, I tried to make plans for a phone call, and he said he would love one. But he, I asked him if he was free on a certain day, and I didn't hear back from him. And you know, it's just he was just going through a lot. He was really busy, and you know, it's okay if you didn't reach out at that point. Um, Because I even thought to myself, God, I wish I just showed up at his house randomly. Like, I wish I just showed up with something for him. You know, I had that thought after I had found out, and I talked to Franny about it, and she said that she showed up at his house and brought cookies, and she knocked for her and her boyfriend. They knocked for a while, and he didn't answer. So it's like all these what ifs, all these what if I did this, what if I did that, what if I reached out. It's like it wouldn't necessarily change anything, you know. I'm grateful for the time that um thank you for posting the link to the video in compassion on nursing in nursing homes. I feel like I like had a stroke in the middle of trying to say that sentence. Um Echoing this statement, we do the best with the information we have at the time. Yes, exactly. Sapphire Nightmare says it's hard to not think everything would be fine. He was so young. Per- Persephone and I spent a good amount of time trying to dissect what happened and placed various amounts of blames on various parties. We eventually sort of realized it didn't make a difference, but more in the pattern of not coping well with the situation. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, my grandma went through something similar. My grandpa, he died because he just slipped on the ice and hit his head, and a couple weeks later, just the blood built up against his brain and it killed him. And he had slipped into a coma before we were in the hospital, and my grandma looked the doctor in the eyes and said, "Is there anything that you can do to save my husband?" And the doctor just looked at her and said, "Lady, even if there was anything we could do, he would be a vegetable. Is that what you want?" And my aunt was so angry that anybody would talk to my grandma like that. justifiably. I mean, I was just a kid. I didn't know about this until later, but apparently my aunt was saying, "Oh, I want to sue for mistreatment or this or that." And trying to point blame on the doctors and this and that, and my grandma, she was just like, "It won't bring them back. I don't want to bother with any of that. It won't bring them back." She's coped for all these years with the death of her husband, and I am so amazed with how she's been able to get through with that. But that, as far as wanting to point blame and realizing, this isn't helping me cope, that's important to recognize because, um, grief, um, actually, there was a quote that I really liked, and I want to make sure I don't lose where I'm at real quick. Um, if you're not careful, um, grief can lead you to a very selfish place. And this is something that Jonathan Decker, a licensed therapist, had said. Um, you can get into this mentality of all that matters, all that matters is my pain, or all that matters is numbing the pain. Um, oh, thank you. Thank you for the follows, guys. I appreciate it. Um, Phoenix Star says, "Hi, Shorty Pop. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm glad you're here today." Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, you guys are so nice. Um, so we're gonna be talking about this is what's considered normal grief. And like I said, we're going to talk about the other types of grief, but these are the 7 stages of what's considered normal grief. Um so we all experience grief differently, but having an understanding of the different types of grief can help you know what to expect. And you might go in a different order, you might bounce back and forth, and you might skip stages entirely. You have shock and denial. You don't believe what's happening right now. You might feel numb, and we talked about that actually. You guys were saying, whenever you first found out about um about what had happened with Aaron, you know, it seemed like it was some sick joke, like it was a lie, like it wasn't true, and um and that's part of it, just not being able to believe what's happening. And then after that, you get this pain and guilt because this loss, it could feel unbearable, and at the same time you could put that blame on yourself, including feeling bad for expressing it to others. um and that is a stage, having pain and then feeling guilty for that pain. That's also a stage of grief, and it doesn't get talked about enough. um we should be allowed to say, "Hey, I I want to talk about this and I want to feel it, but it's hard to express it." You know, um, I've held in being upset about what happened with Aaron, because I just didn't want to upset my friends. Um, and in what ways have you guys, you know, how did you guys relate to this as far as, you know, uh, finding that guilt for showing pain in what you're experiencing? Um, you know, I've uh oh, I'm sorry. There was more to I was going to say, what are some things that you felt like gave you that additional pressure that you couldn't express it? And like, how did that affect you? Because we all have external factors as to why we feel like we can't express something. Maybe we're worried we're going to bring other people down. Maybe we were told we shouldn't express this. Maybe we're worried about, when I was at Aaron's funeral, somebody said, "Oh, I don't want to cry because I don't want to take this away from the family." And it's like, we're all crying, we're all sad. Like, that doesn't us expressing our pain doesn't take away from the pain that other people are experiencing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, I've uh I've spent time with my friends and had a really great time and laughs, and then just immediately when I got into my car just burst into tears. Um Holding it in for me personally became more of a necessity. It felt like, because I broke down crying at work and I had to work the next day, you know, and I thought I can't show this, but I started to not want to experience it, even at home, not letting myself cry. And it got to a point where I broke down crying in the grocery aisle because I saw a box of strawberry Pop Tarts. Um, so, um, Louis the Class says, talking has been. Thanks for letting me like cry at you guys. I'm sorry. I've like tried so hard to like not. Um, Talking has been helpful for me to process it. I tried to be mindful and state to myself what was happening and what it means. And when I talked to people, we cried together. I felt like I didn't spend as much time in denial or holding it in because of my friends and my openness. I think that makes sense too for you, Louie, with how you found out, because like you saw through the posts and you had like a bunch of missed calls from me and sad emoji texts. Um so I feel like you had a lot to confirm, like, okay, this is really happening, rather than just getting it from a single source. I'm wondering if, like, do you think that's what helped? Um and Louis says, I felt like you were one of those people who helped me most, Shorty Pop. I needed to have a lot of those conversations. I'm glad that I could help you. Yeah, when I saw the missed calls, I felt my stomach drop, definitely. Um, yeah, I'm really glad that I was able to it, that I was able to help be there for you and help you with processing it. Um, Not letting yourself, it's important to note that not letting yourself grieve can manifest itself, not just emotionally but also physically. um we talked about how, like, feeling anger, that's another step of grief. Anger and bargaining, you may lash out. If you believe in a higher power, you might be angry with them. Or you have those, like we talked about, those what if feelings. Maybe you're lashing out on people because of what you're experiencing. For you guys, I'm interested to hear, when you experience grief, that anger that you experienced. We talked a little bit about that, as far as the initial shock goes. In what ways do you think you might have found yourself experiencing that stage of grief, that anger, not just at that initial shock, but just, um, did you act angry towards yourself? Did you, I mean, we talked about, I guess we already did talk about that, so look at you guys. You guys are ahead of me, and, I felt angry even with my therapist, just like, I felt like nobody knew the right thing to say. And my dad had to tell me, like, hey, sometimes people don't know what to say and they're trying their best. And it took me a second to be able to step back and be like, you're right. Um, and then you have this stage of depression where you isolate yourself and you're feeling lonely, but you work on processing what happened. Um, Another thing that Jonathan Decker, Elisa's therapist, had said was, and this surprised me, was depression can be a healthy thing to experience. That time of reflection can be a necessary part of grieving. Um, and he mentions that if you suppress that, if you don't care, it doesn't hurt. But if you don't hurt, you don't heal. And I really love that quote a lot. It reframes depression as a part of healing instead of something inherently negative. And I really want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Whenever I heard that quote, I was like, I can't wait to share this with you guys. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on reframing depression and grief as a part of necessary processing and healing. Maybe you disagree with that. That's completely valid too, but I'd love to hear from you guys about it. Um, I know that I didn't want to fall into a depression, so I hung out with friends and tried to keep a routine to not fall into it, but my first few days, like, I couldn't get out of bed. My taking care of my ferrets were my motivation to get out and get up and feed them and get my day started. Um, and then we have the upward turn where the anger and pain have died down. I'm going to check the chat real quick. I thought I skipped anger, but then I remembered something odd. The day after the funeral, I was very tired and I was extremely busy at work. For the first time in 10 years, I yelled at my boss. It wasn't at all about Aaron, but it was the first time I lost my temper at work. Oh, wow. I'm not sure if you told me about that actually, but that makes sense. I mean, you're going through a period that's really hard for you where you feel like you've been cheated, you know? That's what grieving feels like. It feels like you got cheated out of time with that person, that they got cheated out of a longer life. Um, it makes sense to just feel angry. In sometimes that anger can get directed at the wrong people, but um, hopefully you were able to, you know, I already know that you are on good terms with your boss now, so I'm glad that that all worked out. But I know that you're introspective and you're able to collect yourself, even whenever you're going through things like that. So, um, it's okay that that happened. And you're, you know, and I said, I think maybe I was ignoring the fact that I had another reason for a short fuse. That makes sense. Yeah. I definitely noticed I was getting really pissed off really easily, um, after all of that. Like, I just felt less patient with things going on. Um, Johnny Gamble says my boss and I actually kind of had a good conversation on it. Helped significantly by being able to get time off the day after I found out for the funeral though. That's good. I'm actually really glad that you were able to do that. I did something similar. I mean, I didn't really get like a whole talk with my boss. I just told her that I needed to take PTO for the week because of what had happened, and she said that well, like she later told me she made an exception because this was like an emergency. Normally you have to like put it in advance, but I was glad that she was accepting and allowed me to get that time off. And I'm glad that you were able to get time off to go to the funeral too, because, and we'll talk about it too, going to a funeral, going to a wake, going to things like that can be a huge part in grieving. I, um, uh, Louis says he didn't even recognize it as anger, but I said the feature you want is already implemented. It's right here. It's in the code. That's about as feisty as I get. I can like kind of picture you saying that even though I've never heard you angry. I'm putting on my glasses again because I feel like I look like a puffy, sad lady. Um, Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, I pretty strongly believe that emotional, emotionality and experiencing emotions are largely good for you. Anything can go too far, but we tend to call emotions like anger, fear, and sorrow bad emotions when they aren't at all. I'm not super depressive, but generally have an experience of the world more defined by sorrow than the average person. And I don't think it's a bad thing. It can be as much of a strength as a weakness. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Because I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Inside Out. They have all these characters, and there's sadness, there's happiness, there's joy. And joy is always annoyed at sadness because it's just like, oh, what's the point of sadness? Just be happy, just be positive. And you get into the territory of toxic positivity where it's like, no, you shouldn't feel this, just push it away. But sadness is important. It allows you to experience something. You go through that emotion and you see yourself at the other side of it. You get to the other side of it and you've learned something from it because you've processed that. um you're right, you're absolutely right. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, I was able to take a bereavement day for each family member who died this year, but had to use PTO for Aaron's funeral, even though it was a lot harder on me. Doesn't really matter. I have plenty of PTO, just salt in the wound. Yeah, I think I agree with you. You're right. Like we should be able to use bereavement days for people who were close to us. You know, um, I had um I had a partner's family member pass away, and I was really sad about that. And um, because I, had gotten to know that person, and uh, I was able to take the day off for that, but I didn't get bereavement for that. And all that is to say, I understand what I understand where you're coming from. I'm not trying to make it about me. I guess I just meant to relate it to I've experienced something like that. And yeah, but Aaron's passing was it was really it's really hard on all of us. Um VI Falcon says, I'm grateful to experience sadness over feeling nothing. I'm grateful that I can feel some type of way and acknowledge the impact Aaron had on me. I think that's a really great way to look at it. Um uh oh, that actually brings us to the upward turn. That is a stage in grief where the anger and pain have died down. You're feeling more calm. Um, it's weird to say acceptance because it's like you can still accept that it's happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's a resolution. So, when talking about the stages of grief, I think it's more appropriate to say the upward turn because you're getting to a point where you're like, okay, you know, I'm feeling a little better. I'm still sad about this, but I'm okay. Life is going on. And then finally you get to this stage of, and like I said, you could still bounce back and forth. You could still go back to denial. You could still go back to these other feelings, but ideally, you get to a point where it's called reconstruction and working through. You can start to move forward and maybe you reevaluate things. So that's normal, quote unquote, grief. But like I said, there's no timeline, but it follows a generally predictable pattern, which leads us to types of grief. Ideally, you get to this point of acceptance, like, hey, I can do this. Um, but we're going to talk about when grief can take a not so great turn. Um, but from what we've talked about, from the stages of grief, what step do you feel best represented where you're currently at? And remember, even if you're at a stage of, um, we'll say acceptance, or the upward turn, or you're feeling better, even if you're towards that, um, you're still valid in just knowing, like, you're still mourning, you still care about that person. It doesn't take away from the care you have for that person. But you feel like hopefully you can feel like you've picked up the pieces and your life is starting to get back to normalcy. That's the goal. It's okay if you do go back to the other phases and bounce back to this. And then we talk about, when we talk about types of grief, we talked a little bit about anticipatory grief, which V.I. Falcon had mentioned, where it's going to happen. Somebody's sick, maybe they are experiencing, drug addiction, and they've overdosed before, or they've had suicide attempts. Louie and I had this discussion before, I believe. Yeah, we talked about this before, but I wanted to ask you guys, if you guys were sick, like terminally ill, and you knew that you were going to die, would you tell people? I was really interested to, I know that's a little bit, I wouldn't say off topic, but I think just getting into the mindset of that, it's interesting, because I had an Uber customer who told me that her dad had cancer and never told anybody, and she was telling me, like, I never forgave him. She felt that resentment towards him for never telling her, so she couldn't have that. She wanted to experience that anticipatory grief to be able to ease her into what had happened, because it was so sudden, and she felt like she got cheated out of that. But also, on the other side of that coin, and that doesn't invalidate how she feels at all. You're allowed to feel that way. And we look at, well, why would somebody do that? Well, they're not a Disney villain. They're not a bad person. If you're sick, you might just not want people to treat you differently in the last time that you're here. You just want to be treated the same. That's valid too. There's no right or wrong answer to that. It's just, what do you feel is best for you and what you need? Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, I would tell everyone in some sort of avant-garde. Wow, I'm like illiterate. I know everybody else is like pronouncing it right at home and being like, Shorty Pop, it's this, but avant-garde day. I was tempted to pull it up on Google, but we'll just move on. Multimedia performance art piece. Don't think I could resist. That's delightful. I once asked a friend of mine what she would do if somebody that I knew, there was somebody I talked about in particular, and I was like, what would you do if so and so died? It was my favorite teacher. I was like, how would you tell me that he passed away? And she's like, I think I would do it in a puppet show. So whenever you said you would do a performative art piece, it just brought that memory to mind. I like that idea. There was actually, that also reminds me, there was somebody had told me that there was this guy who had passed away, but he left a video he left a video to be played at his funeral. But he just kept making jokes the whole time, like, look at me, I'm in the box right over there, I'm in a box, whoa, and just like being goofy, and it made his whole family laugh and his loved ones laugh. And I think, hey, that ain't a bad way to go about it if brings comfort to people. Johnny Gamble says, I'm pretty sure I'd tell people. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard to know how you would feel if it was actually happening, because right now it's in the abstract. It's not really happening. But when you're actually in it, you're more affected by these emotions and you have this hot, cold empathy gap. So it's like you might say to yourself, oh, I would tell them. But when you're in that moment, it can be hard to know for sure. So, that's why I thought it was interesting that you said I'm pretty sure, because it's like, it sounds reflective to be like, I think so, but it's hard to be sure. Um, Louis the Claw says I would think about each of my closest people. J Rambo 1703 is now following. Thank you. Aw. And that little animated dinosaur also just brings some warmth to my heart, and I especially need that today, so thank you. Um, I would think about each of my closest people, and if they would want to know, I would tell them if that's what I thought they wanted. That makes sense. It is hard to know like how they would feel if they'd want to know. I I think I'd want to know. Yeah. In general, I definitely want to know if you're sick, Louis. Please. Um. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says I know my tone is puckish, but I'm being totally serious. I was diagnosed with a metastatic disease with a potentially fatal prognosis in 2018. My close friends knew, but I actually wrote a stand-up comedy routine for a larger announcement. It was fortunately cured surgically, so I didn't have to use it. Oh, wow. And I think that's incredible that you turned I mean, even if you didn't go through with, you know, doing the set, I still think that's incredible that you put that together. Um, wow. Um, I really like that. If you have a stand-up comedy YouTube channel, feel free to drop it in the chat and promote yourself because um, I'd definitely like to check it out. Unless you're somebody I know IRL in the comedy scene. Well, still send it to me, but uh, it'd be funny if I already knew you and have seen you perform. But yeah, I think that's really thoughtful that you were willing to do it in a way that would bring people laughter and joy to help with that blow. Um, Johnny Gamble says, it looks like he agrees. He says, laughing is an important part to the funeral. I think if you can pull it off, hearing the stories about Aaron at the funeral was really nice. Yeah. I I liked Vudajin's story about asking Aaron about a level in a game, and like looking up to him because, you know, he was like a few years older. And, yeah, uh, Aaron was the guy to go to for video game tips. The comedian Louis the Claw says the comedian Del Close faked his last words countless times so that when he actually died, it was distinguishable from one of his bits. He faked his last words? Wait, what do you mean he faked his last words? Like you mean he did a bit of like what his last words would be? Or like he staged something? Like I'm so confused. Um J Rambo 1703 says, "Yo, can I ask you a question?" Ask away. Yes, please go ahead. I am an open book. Um Sorry if it took me a while to respond to this. The chat's blowing up. But yeah, go ahead. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, we met at Aaron's funeral. Big blonde dude. I used to be a Pittsburgh Melee player. Oh, okay. I didn't know that you also did comedy. Well, we will have a lot to talk about uh at some point after the stream because I was also in the comedy scene, and I'd love to talk about that. Maybe we know some of the same people in the scene, actually. We might have some other mutuals. Um, do you play Super Mario RPG? Yes, that's the quote. Thank you for sharing that, Johnny Gamble. How do you beat the Axum Rangers? Jacob's speech was really beautiful. Yeah, he did a really great job. He told me, and I guess I should have probably followed this advice when writing the stream, but he told me that when he wrote the eulogy for his dad, he wrote out everything that he was going to say explicitly. So whenever he ended up reading it, that was all he could think about, and he couldn't get through the speech because he said he got choked up. It was really hard, but he decided when he wrote the eulogy for Aaron to just have a few notes but not have it all written out because he wanted something else to think about while he was reading the eulogy, to other than just, whenever there's nothing to distract from the pain and you're just reading and you're thinking about it in the back of your mind versus being involved in the story and telling it. That was what he said helped him be able to deliver that. And now that I'm going a little bit more off script and just getting to, because I do write out what I'm going to say. And I kept telling myself, I was like, I know this is probably a bad idea to write this all out, but I'm going to do it. I think that it helped me in journaling as far as like writing this out as a script goes. But um, definitely I had to use the hide the hurt glasses for that reason. Um, Louis the Claw says, yeah, Del Close kept pretending to die while he was sick. Oh, huh. I'll have to look up some of his comedy. Um, oh, but also the not so great types of grief. The destructive, the otherwise known as complicated grief. It's an umbrella term. So let me know if any of these sound like something you guys could relate to as well, or bring clarity to how you've been feeling. Um, Complicated grief is debilitating and or long lasting. You can be at risk if you're struggling with a mental illness, depression, or anxiety. Um, you have chronic grief, and that's grief that doesn't lessen over time. We've seen, okay, we get to a point where we're experiencing this massive, unbearable pain, and then you're getting to a point where you're like, okay, I'm picking up the pieces, I can do this, my life can go on. But when it doesn't lessen over time and you have no progress in functioning or mood, uh that's why coping properly is important. You also have, there's something called distorted grief, and that's grief that's not, or it's extreme, it's self-destructive, and it's self-loathing, and you're hostile to others. And that is where, whenever we talked about experiencing anger and grieving, um, that you might lash out and things like that. Yeah, that is normal. It's not uncommon, but you can't justify it. You can't say, "Well, I'm not going to apologize. I deserve to." Like, yes, you're allowed to feel the way you do, but when you get into this self-destructive behavior, you're hurting the people around you. You're hurting your connections, your family, your work life. Whenever it gets to a point where it's just there's no progress, that's when it's self-destructive. That's what distorted grief is. Every time you feel anger, I thought this was really interesting, actually. Um, this quote: every time you feel anger, it's something else in disguise. And we talked about this before. We talked about the anger iceberg, where you see this at the top and you're like, "Oh, I'm angry because of this thing." And it's like, "Well, actually all this stuff was building up, and this reminded me of this, and I was feeling I was feeling judged, or I was feeling um self-conscious, or I was feeling hurt by this." And that manifests itself into anger, into lashing out. um we have cumulative, where one traumatic event happens after another. And I forget who, I think Sapphire Nightmare Blade, I think that was you that had mentioned about experiencing several deaths this past year. Is that right? That's cumulative grief, where you're experiencing grief on top of grief. Maybe you haven't even gotten to finish grieving the first person, and then there's just more that comes along. So do any of these sound like something that you guys have experienced or seen somebody go through these types of abnormal grief? You know, I I was gonna bring up a story, but it's a bit personal to somebody else, so I don't think I should bring it up, so I won't. But um, and then I'm gonna check the chat. Okay. Um, yep, that's me. Yeah, they were all three over the course of just a few months, each unexpected. Wow. Yeah, that that's insane. Um, I don't think I've ever had something like that where yeah, I'm really sorry that you went through that. And um especially when it's unexpected, you know, because you didn't even have that period of anticipatory grief with any of them. It was all just like boom, 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 this is happening. Um, and when you get whenever you're experiencing grief and you have these complications, it can also lead to prolonged grief, because you're not able to grieve in a healthy way. You're not able to grieve in a normal way, because all of this other stuff is piling on top of you, or whatever else is happening. Um, Prolonged grief is it's not just it's not just lasting a long time. It's when somebody, and this is a different thing, but this is when somebody spends an unhealthy amount of time contemplating the death to the point of dysfunction. They're hyper focused on wanting to see them again. Um, we feel like if we're happy, we're betraying the departed, and that the more we suffer, the more that they meant. Um, but even if you didn't experience prolonged grief at any point, did you feel this guilt about being happy during moments in your life when you felt like you should continue to be sad for the person that you lost? Did you guys have um that guilt for that? Um Especially if you felt some sort of um guilt about the loss. Uh like, oh, I wish I said this, I wish I had done this, I wish I had this certain experience. And we're all going through that. It's like, oh, I wish, VI Falcon, I wish I was able to have this experience where I would watch gargoyles with him like we always said we would. um I wish I had reached out more. A lot of you guys have already um echoed that. um I didn't I mean, he had told me that he was sick, that he had anemia, but I didn't know what anemia was. I thought it was just like an iron deficiency. And I knew he had a lot of doctor's appointments, but I just thought he would be okay. I didn't understand how sick he was, and I felt so guilty at myself. I felt mad at myself for not responding more viscerally when he had initially told me about it, because I just didn't know it was severe. Um, but as part of a healthy way of coping with grief, it's like I had to tell myself, I didn't know, and I did the best with the information I had. Um, and don't put guilt on yourself for these happy times that you're experiencing. Your loved one would want you to be happy. Um, so don't feel that guilt when you're on an upswing, which leads us into how to cope with grief. And I had said before, you have to understand something in order to overcome it. And now that we have a better understanding of grief and what it is and how it works and how we're feeling, let's dive into what our journey in coping might look like, as far as, well, where do we go now? Okay, I understand that we're grieving, but where do we go from here? So I'm going to scroll through. Actually, I think I have some messages from you guys. Oh, Louis says, I usually process a bit slower than the people around me, so most of my guilt of not being emotionally appropriate happens at the beginning of my grief. Okay. And that falls in line with what we had said about delayed grief, where you're and I mean, there's variations of that. I mean, if it took you, I know that you said with your grandpa, like, it took you, I think, how long until you were able to cry about it? Like months or a year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Um, there's people who they don't feel the sadness until more than a year or a couple years afterwards, because it just doesn't compute. Um, there's nothing wrong with the fact that it takes you longer to process it. But it makes sense that you feel that guilt. Even though you don't deserve to put that guilt on yourself, it makes sense that you're feeling it. Um, but yeah, I definitely have that guilt around not visiting my grandpa when he was sick too. I've forgiven myself, but I still recognize that feeling. Oh, well, good. It's funny because I had said that, and then I got to your next comment, and you're already ahead of me. Yeah, definitely. I'm really glad that you've forgiven yourself for that, because you deserve that compassion, you know? Um, VI Falcon says, definitely felt that guilt earlier in my life with my grandmother's death, but I think Aaron or whoever is dear to us that might pass away would want us to feel happy, so I didn't try to avoid. It was still hard to get to a point where I could be happy. You're saying it was hard to get to a point where you could be happy after your grandma passed or after Aaron passed? I mean, I understand, like, to a degree both, but I'm just trying to make sure I understand. But yeah, um, it makes sense though to struggle to get to that other side of that, because it's just so much to deal with. Um, oh, Louis says at least weeks, if not a month. And it was just random, whatever. I started crying about it. I think I was alone. Um, yeah, I'm really sorry that you guys have experienced that, and I'm glad that we can talk about it, because it should be normalized to be able to talk about grief. Um, and that's the thing too, is like saying the person's name, like not being afraid to continue talking about them. Um, VI Falcon says, after Aaron passed, even though I didn't feel guilt, it's not like I could automatically be okay. I still had to grieve. Yeah. Yeah, I know that you had said that both you and Louie had expressed to me that it was hard for you to like express some of that uh what you were feeling. And I'm really glad that you've come to a point now where you feel okay. Um, he passed away the day before uh, Halloween, for those of you who are curious. And now it's midway through January. I scheduled to do this stream in advance because I wanted to wait a long time before. I wanted to wait a couple months to do it so that I could do it with like composure. Um, but yeah, as far as coping goes, you know, obviously you have to grieve in a way that works for you. But here are some things that I was reading about, and I wanted to share and get your thoughts on this. Um, like we talked about with depression in previous streams, as far as how to deal with it, sticking to your routine. And I had said about getting out of just to get out of bed, like the ferrets were my motivation for that. And you take it one day at a time. Um, the other part about the other another way to cope is self-care, and that includes letting others help you. Um, Even though it's called self-care, it's like love yourself enough to let other people step in and be there for you because you need it. Don't feel like, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but if you do feel like you shouldn't accept help or invitations to things or whatever, um because you're worried about what you'll put on another person or whatever, but they're reaching out because they want to help you, let them help you. Let them, I mean, it's okay to be open and say, hey, I can't hang out today or whatever, but as long as you're being honest with yourself about, am I letting the people who can help me do what I know I need? That's self-care too. Um Take care of yourself and comfort yourself when you're sad. I know, like, I used to have a problem with, like, and this is weird to admit live, but like I used to have a problem with self-harming, and like to replace that action, if I would feel upset about myself, I would just like kind of like give myself like a shoulder rub, which felt nice. So, like, doing these things where it's just like having something with you at any moment that you can do to give yourself that comfort, a nice grounding activity. Being able to comfort yourself when you're sad is so important. So what are some self-care things that help you guys when you're feeling down, for me, like, I've established an anti-anxiety routine with my therapist where I'll like light some incense, and like as it's burning and I'm waiting for it to be able to blow it out so it can start smoking, as I'm watching the flame, I center myself where it's like I'm watching the flame, I feel the warmth, I smell the fire. So, and I'm grounded in that, and I give myself these positive affirmations while I'm doing that until I blow it out, and I'm focusing on my breath as I blow out the flame. And then whenever I put it in there, it's like, okay, now the room is smelling nice, and it just reminds me everything's okay. Um, those are some things that I do personally. And I'd love to hear your guys' ways of helping yourselves whenever you're feeling down. Um, Also, I spend time with my ferrets and playing violin. Violin was really big for me to cope with the death of my grandma, and those kinds of things require being in the moment too. Um, and I think those help me. Um, Checking your chat. Um, First time chat. Ez Marks. Sema. Kotem? Oh, is that Spanish? Does anybody know what you know what? Let me use Google Translate. What if it's gonna be naughty words? I wonder. Somebody's just punking me. Google Translate. I think it's Spanish. We'll find out. Boop. Kotam? What's up? Oh, it's Polish. Oh, cool. Well, hi, Ens Marks. Kotam right back. Sema. Siema. What does that mean? Hiya. Oh. Aw. Well, I'm learning a little bit of Polish today. Thank you for that. These little breaks of you guys just saying stuff that, I don't know. You're bringing some smiles my way. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking what's up. How are you? Um, Johnny Gamble says talking to people usually works best for me as a coping thing. I think that's good. I think, yeah, spending time with friends and just being open about how you're feeling, but um also just being able to share in good times with friends too. And I think that's great that you have that you have these connections in your lives um for that. Definitely not something to take for granted, because there's definitely people that they don't have anybody to go to. So I think it's really something to be grateful for, that you have these people in your life that can understand you on a level that you can express yourself vulnerably, and they don't judge any of the feelings that you're expressing. Um, Johnny Gamble says, not even necessarily talking about the thing causing grief, just generally talking to people is my go-to. Ah, okay. Well, that's also good too. I'm glad that you have that. Um, as Mark says, aha. Does that just mean aha? Yes, okay. Louis says, I love that. If I'm anxious, I like to exercise. If I'm sad or lonely, I like to hug a pillow. Sometimes I'll meditate. Oh, yeah, a really lovely fun fact that you had taught me, Louis, was that sometimes when we're feeling cold, like when we feel a chill, it's actually that we're feeling lonely. And sometimes just like hugging something can warm us up. So I really like that. I think that's sweet. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, same with me. Talking to friends has helped me a lot. It's just eventually all I'm doing is saying the same things. And with Aaron in particular, I don't think I've done a good job at reaching the acceptance phase. Everyone views deaths in their lives as tragic, but it happening to Aaron of all people is hard to deal with, I guess. Yeah. I mean, with like grandparents and stuff, like, like my nana, she's a lot older, and I think, okay, I should call her, I should give her a call, see how she's doing, because you know that, like, you have a limited amount of time with them. But Aaron, it's just like, it happened so suddenly, and Aaron was just, the differences he made in people's lives are immeasurable. And it's sad to see that such a good person that this would happen to them so young. I read that article where he said he wanted to have his own video game company someday. He was working on a game, and um
knowing that, just reading like, hey, he had this dream and it never happened, really made my heart sink to read that. It is hard, and it's okay that you don't feel like you've gotten to that, I don't want to say the end of grieving, but that phase of grieving where you feel like at least you're picking up the pieces. You know, it's okay to not be there yet. I hope that for you, that you can get to that point, because just, I care about you and I want to see you be okay, but it's okay to not be okay too. I don't think people get told that enough. Another thing about self-care that's important to note is that self-care, and I needed to be reminded of this whenever I was like in the most of the thick of my grieving. You know, I was eating like I was just like smoking so much weed and just getting so fried and like eating food. I'd be like in bed just like shoveling junk food into my face, like not even giving a fuck, and I'd say this is self-care, I'm treating myself. But the thing is self-care isn't indulgence, it's maladaptive. So when we talk about self-care, when we talk about coping, we want to focus on healthy ways to cope. So, you know, what are some healthy ways to cope that have helped you? You know, we talked about, you know, you guys said about spending time with friends. That's a big thing, and I think that's great. And Melee, enjoying an activity he liked, that is adaptive. You're adapting to the situation. It's not harmful to you. It's actually an improvement. It's bringing you together. It's bringing you with the people that you care about. You're enjoying an activity that you're engaging in that you can like even you can gain a skill in too. Not that that's like the end game, but it doesn't hurt. And another way of coping is redefining yourself. And ask yourself, how do you want to live your life? How can that be influenced by the person who was close to you? You know, what are your goals in life? You know, Aaron was kind. I want to be more patient with people. And Aaron and I didn't get many pictures together. And now I take pictures with friends more, and I don't get annoyed when my mom wants to take pictures anymore, because I appreciate that I have them, because I know I won't have her forever either. I was picking on you, VI Falcon, the other day when your mom wanted to take a picture, and you were like, Mom, and I was like, you be happy about these pictures. That's why, because I think about that kind of stuff. And I'm so grateful for all of the pictures I have with my mom and my family, because I know they won't be around for forever. But I forgot to mention, but I actually put a picture of Aaron and I in the stream. It was a little frame I decorated. Actually, I'd love to show this to you guys. On one of my shelves, I have like a bunch of little sunflowers and bumblebee charms and some other things that remind me of Aaron, and I put this together. Like, every year I get stickers for my friends for Christmas, and I send out Christmas letters. If you didn't get a Christmas letter from me, it's probably coming. A lot of shit's been going on, so I didn't send all of them. But these were the stickers that I would have given to Aaron. So I put them on the frame because I wanted to it actually helps me to have this and have like a little memorial in my apartment that I can go to, because when I'm feeling lonely and I miss him, it's like I can walk over to that and I can see this picture of us and I can see things that remind me of him, and it makes me feel closer to him even though he's not here. um um I'm looking at my notes. Also, counseling is an important step that you can take. It's a pain in the ass to get counseling sometimes. VI Falcon, you said that sometimes on college campuses there's people who are going to school for psychology that will counsel you, and you can get like cheaper options, or they'll do it for free, I think, actually, to get their training in. So for those of you who might not, I mean, I don't I know I have viewers from different countries and stuff too, but with our healthcare system here being what it is, that could be an option. Hello, Scout. Um, Also, another way of coping is do something, you know, channel your fear. I have to talk a little quieter because Scout is right by my face and he doesn't like when I talk too loud. But channel your feelings into creative pursuits. Create something positive out of something bad. Um, so, what ideas come to mind when you think about a creative way to channel your feelings into something? I know that you guys have talked about um, uh, Sapphire Blade had said about um, having done a comedy bit, actually, or written a comedy bit, when, I mean, at the same time, like, you were preparing for your friends to grieve, but you were also grieving yourself, actually, I'm sure. So I'm sure that helped you as well. Even though you never performed it, I'm sure writing it was cathartic for you. Um, any type of grief that you're having, I'm hoping that um, if you guys are going through something, that you are able to find something that you feel that you can create. Like I created that little frame. Like, that's a little thing. I mean, I'm doing the stream. That's like a bigger thing, but even something little like that, putting together some stickers and some charms and a photo of us, like, that feels good. So, uh doing the stream, talking about Aaron with you guys, saying his name, and talking about our collective experience in grief. Um, I feel like with this, I can help people who are going through the same thing. Um, and I'm really thankful for all of you who've supported the stream with this. Uh, One perspective is that a way to keep a person, alive is by carrying on in a way that creates a similar positive impact to the one that they left, like helping people. Um, and I'd love to hear how that might resonate with you. You know, I there was a while where I stopped planning parties or reaching out to people as much, but Aaron and I would drive an hour each way to see each other weekly. Um, he withdrew from a lot of people, but I mean, even though he didn't answer, I still called him every 10 days or less. But now I want to make more time for friends. A few days before he died, I actually put this in my calendar to remind myself. I wrote text all friends, and I didn't text everybody, but I just texted a bunch of friends because I realized there's people I haven't reached out to in a while. And, like, I mean, even people I had reached out to, I just wanted to reach out to people and say, hey, how are you? And I messaged that to Aaron, and I got like a bunch of responses from people, but I was, spending time with somebody else. I didn't want to be checking my phone, but I like showed that person my notifications and I was like, whoa, I'm blowing up. And I just like tossed my phone to the side and was like, yeah, I mean, I'm in the moment with you. I'm going to spend time with you. I'm not going to check my phone right now. I'll get back to these. But by the time I got Aaron's message, it was Sunday and he'd passed that morning, and it was already in the afternoon around 2 when I saw his message that said horrible in a big grin smiley face. And after that he sent a message that said, how are you? And I didn't see that he'd said horrible. And I felt so much guilt because I didn't read that message until it was too late. Um, so I want to make more time. I'm not going to hold that against myself, but I do want to make more time for friends. Um, and carry on in that way because, yeah, I, um, you could also create a digital memorial page if that's something that you'd be interested in doing. Um, in, or something like that in your friend's honor. Um, and I'd love to hear, I'm gonna set you down because I'm talking louder now. And as everybody knows, I can't keep quiet. I'm a very loud talker. um, I was keeping track of where I was in my notes. Um, but yeah, so what are some things that come to mind? Maybe you've lost someone to a disease, so you help out at an organization that helps aid in that. And as Lillian mentioned, we're doing a Smash tournament. We're honoring his legacy, and a lot of us, we believe, like, I believe that he lives on. Not just in that, but just, I mean, he's done so much. He lives on in so many ways. Like, it's an understatement. Um, VI Falcon says, yeah, sometimes you can find people in graduate programs. I found seeking help from relatively younger people to be helpful too. I've seen you putting effort in this since his passing. In my opinion, you've always been great at keeping in touch, but I like that you ask for more group photos. I like having pictures of memories too. Thanks, Louie. Um, and yeah, and we talked about a big part of coping is that support, reaching out to friends, reaching out to family, reaching out to a therapist. Um, and then also saying goodbye. It might be hard to go to a funeral or a service or gatherings relating to this, but it can be a huge part in healing. For those of you who didn't know Aaron, just in general, if somebody close to you has passed, how did going to their funeral make you feel? And for those of you who did know Aaron and did come to the funeral, um, do you feel like that helped you in grieving? I mean, we had several events after that, and if you attended them, what did you feel like the impact that gave you was? I know for me personally, I think it made it a lot more real because you can hear that somebody's dead, but when you see them, um, I remember just reaching out to hold his hand in the coffin, and I don't know why I expected it to be warm, but it was such a jarring experience, and it really made the reality sink in. Um, Johnny Gamble says each event really helped me personally. The wake, the smash thing after the wake, the funeral, Mole after the funeral, and going to Abates after Mole. Yeah, I'm really glad that Abate puts that together and that everybody I'm so glad that everybody came together and created these events. And it was so helpful to have more than one thing, cuz it's like if I feel like if we just went to a funeral and then just like went home, it's like, well, what do you do after that, you know? I mean, like it's weird. I went to both of the funerals. Like there was one in the morning and one in the evening, and I guess the morning was more meant for the family, and it was really weird cuz it's like I didn't know any of them, and it just like I felt really isolated cuz it's like, you know, everybody's like introducing themselves and it's like, yo, I'm not at a point to talk to anybody new right now. Like I just um and then there were like hours between where nothing happened, and I drove there by myself. So I drove like an hour by myself just like in the car after that. And I noticed it was way more comforting to come to the second one where everybody came and a lot of us knew each other. I saw people that I hadn't seen in a long time, and it made me in a better headspace to be able to meet new people after. And the events, it was like um it was a lot of fun and hanging out with people and reconnecting, and that really helped me. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, before the event, I remember worrying that us Smashers would be intruding on the family, just a whole bunch of random nerds, but we were hardly even noticeable. I never, yeah, that was like a little bit of how I felt this morning, or not this morning, but the funeral that was in the morning, because it's like I didn't know that was gonna be a family thing. I just saw both and was like, oh, like I want to be able to see everybody that comes too, because like we knew a lot of the same people. But yeah, um, I'm glad that you were able to have. I'm really glad that everybody from the Smash community came. It gave me a sense of perspective on who Aaron was in his life and how many people he touched so deeply. Yeah, definitely. I His dad said that the hat in his coffin was his prom king hat. It's funny because Aaron texted me a picture of that hat once, and I was like, "What is that?" And he never responded. Um, he just left me hanging on what the hat was. And then at his funeral, I saw it in the casket, and his dad was like, "Oh, that's his prom king hat." And I just thought, of course, Aaron was prom king. Like, just like the most charismatic guy. Like, of course, like just always so well loved by everybody. He touched a lot of people. Um, VI Falcon says Johnny Gamble, same. I think seeing friends from the Smash community who all knew how great Aaron was really helped me out. Glad Carol put something together. Oh, I didn't know Carol put that together. He he put together Mole, or that thing right after where we had drinks. Um Johnny Gamble says, I fully agree on seeing the people who knew how great he was being very beneficial. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says the viewing was really brutal. I didn't think they somehow had the wrong guy or something, but actually seeing him and going, yeah, that's him. He sure is dead, hit real hard. Yeah. I didn't Louis says I didn't cry at the viewing, but I wanted to process it, so I tried to be really mindful. I kept repeating in my mind that I was looking at my friend and what had happened. when I went to the funeral, I heard the beautiful stories of remembrance and I saw my friends crying and I started crying too. Wow. And I'm really thankful that this stream has given you guys the opportunity to open up about this, because, like, even the people who I talk to IRL regularly in this chat, I'm still learning out, finding out new stuff about how you've been processing it, and I'm really thankful that you came and that you're sharing, all of you, what you're going through. Um, Sapphire Nightmare Blade says the Smasher gatherings were all valuable, and I wouldn't have been able to skip the funeral. I'm glad we had a lot of events too. The thing was, the thing after was Carol, yeah. Oh, well, big shout out to Nick Carroll for putting that together. Um, uh, this is like random. I don't know how this pertains to grief exactly, but for me personally, I remember going through a lot of our text messages and it brought me a little closer, I think. Seeing conversations we had, seeing how often, like, I was like, hey, how are you? And him saying positive things and being like, hey, I'm actually just having a really great day. It's just a good day today. And, um, joking about stuff, being like, hey, can I bring my laundry over? And him saying, bring your two heartiest loads, me hearty. You know, little things like that I had forgotten about until I went back and reread them. Um, I don't know if did you guys do anything like that? I found some videos of, that he sent me while he was pet sitting of him being with the ferrets, and, I should, maybe I could edit some of those videos into this if I feel so inclined. um, but also accepting not having an answer uh is an important part of grieving, you know? Like, the autopsy hasn't come back yet. I think they said it's going to come back in February, but even without that, it's like, for me personally, it's like, well, I mean, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily change anything. But the thing is sometimes in life you don't always get an answer whenever you grieve. Sometimes maybe you've been friends with somebody for a long time. Maybe they ghost you and you don't know what happened, or maybe somebody you know and care about went missing and you never knew what happened. I mean, they're different forms of grieving, you know. Um, uh, Also, getting a keepsake from them can be helpful. I actually have his steel drum. The last time he came here, I said, hey, do you want this back? And he said, why don't you hang on to it? And whenever I got the call that he passed, I remember just being in my apartment alone by myself, crying and wishing I had something of his. And I looked over and I saw that I had the steel drum under the coffee table, and I kept it there so that when I had friends over, that they would be inclined to pull it up and start playing on it and just enjoying the moment with each other. And I keep it there still, but it's like, sometimes when I'm sad, I just like hug it. It's nice to have something of his. So, part of grieving, like, maybe you'll ask a family member, hey, could I have a keepsake? That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes sense to just want to hold something that belonged to that person. Um, Recalling fond memories, which we've been doing. Talking about memories of Aaron. Re- uh, Also revisiting places that are important to you and that person, or recreating memories with them.
Um, if their death was near a holiday, you might create a new tradition in their honor. Um, I decorated for Christmas with my friends because the last time I decorated for Christmas, it was with Aaron. I was going through a really hard time Christmas of last year, and um, I was going through a breakup, and the person had moved out, and my apartment was just so empty, and I just felt it was a really painful time, and just looking around and seeing the empty walls, and just like part of it felt like I didn't have my home anymore. It just felt so different. And Aaron, I told him, "Hey, can you come over and decorate for Christmas with me? Like, can we have cookies? And I just want to have a nice night because I want to make this house feel more cozy like a home, and can you help me?" And he did, and he came over. And so now I want to make that a tradition with me and my friends where I have them over and we decorate together. And he loved dolphins. I got this for him. I was going to put it in his casket when they buried him, but I didn't because I didn't get it in time. But I could put it in the stream. And we put it on top of the Christmas tree too. That's going to be a tradition. Um, and again, these are just suggestions, but um, I'm going to check the chat real quick. Also, okay. Okay. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, I read through a lot of our text messages, but not all. I don't think it helped me, honestly. Lots of hopes and dreams for the future talk. I also watched some of the clips from our Tales of Symphonia stream with the intention of publishing the parts with him somewhere, but I wasn't really ready for that either. Oh. That makes sense. Yeah. That's I think VI Falcon, you were saying that you were expressing that earlier that you looked through your messages. You and I both looked through your messages with Aaron, and we saw about how you guys had talked about gargoyles and everything and wanting to watch that together. And um I looked back at some plans that didn't go through too, and um yeah, I understand. It makes sense where you're coming from about just you're already grieving, and now on top of that, you're now mourning what you never got to experience too. You're not just it's like you're not just mourning that person anymore. It's like you had all these hopes and dreams. My friend, he adopted an elderly dog, and his name was Maynard. He loved Maynard, and Maynard had passed away. Well, my friend is doing this Kickstarter project, um, and it's like a D&D based rap album. And he said that there were so many adventures that he wanted to go on with his dog. He wanted to take Maynard to different places and go on road trips and do all kinds of fun things, and he never got to. He got cheated out of that experience, and he was really sad about it. So what he did was he found a way to include his dog in the D&D adventures, the Dungeons and Dragons adventures in the album that he's writing, as a way to commemorate that, and also in a way get to experience the things that he wanted to experience that he didn't get a chance to. Um and uh I'm doing that too. Like I want to watch The Black Phone with a bunch of my friends that we were originally going to go watch it cuz we didn't get to go see it with Aaron. So it's like it's still, even though it won't be the same, since we were talking about how
Spending time with friends is very helpful. Sorry, my jaw is like hurting. And we were talking about how spending time with friends is very helpful. Turning, finding a way to turn the activities that you didn't get to experience with that person into something that you can do moving forward, whether it's with your friends or in a creative pursuit. Um, I mean, the way you grieve is individual to you, so maybe this isn't something that you'd be interested in, but um, it's always an option to try to do those things with other people that that um that you're close to, or that maybe also knew him, and you guys can all enjoy something like that together. And that's not to dismiss the pain that you're feeling from that, um the grieving from not being able to do those things, but I'm hoping that if at all there's some comfort to be found in that. um Creating a new tradition is good. Jacob and I have talked about having an annual Memorial Melee event around Halloween for him. Require costumes, have karaoke, stuff like that. I love that. I think that's an amazing idea. Um, yeah. Um, actually, and I think that that is so important to remember them. Um, in relation to grief, have any of you guys seen The Babadook? Um, it's a movie that talks a lot about grief. It's a really great movie. It's like a horror movie. It's like a psychological thriller, and it makes you. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that you have to face this. Like pushing it down doesn't do anything, but saying their name, like I keep saying Aaron. Like I don't want to just say, "Oh, my friend who passed." It's like Aaron. Like I want to bring up his name because he was a person. Like I don't know. I don't know if that. I almost dismissed myself and said I don't know if that sounds silly, but it doesn't. So, yeah. Um, no one else. Again, like I said, these are suggestions. The big takeaway is nobody else can tell you how to grieve but yourself. But we can get through this together. We can help each other find out how to move forward and pick up the pieces by listening and checking in and um, having these events, these ideas, sharing, and what else can we do? What else can we plan? I love that we're doing this, and also just really being in the moment with somebody. Um, and kind of wrapping up here, but I wanted to, because grief can lead us down these destructive roads. Not only is it important to keep ourselves from going down a bad path, but it's important that we help our friends at these times, which leads us to how to help others in their grieving. So for helping someone who is grieving, don't let fears about saying or doing the wrong thing stop you from reaching out. You know, I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but I know definitely if somebody's passed away and I know somebody's grieving, I've in the past been afraid to even bring it up because I would think, oh, what if they're not thinking about it? But it is good to just do those check-ins and things like that. I don't know if you guys like relate to that or if you've ever had that anxiety of like, oh, like, should I not bring it up? Like, I don't know. If you guys have had that feeling, like, let me know because, I mean, even with Morning Air, and there were times where I wanted to bring up a story and share it with my friends, but I didn't want to because I was worried I would cry. And even though I've been crying through this whole stream, but I guess it's a little different because I'm still like alone in a room, even though everybody could see me. um, but just letting your grieving loved ones know that you're here to listen. And I really appreciate all of you guys that were in chat today, just being there for everybody. And I specifically asked Louie if he could say things to cheer me up if he sees me crying on the stream. And I specifically asked VI Falcon if we could talk on Discord after this, because in general, I just get inexplicably low. It's like a weird phenomenon, but I get inexplicably lonely after my streams because it's such a rush of like um just interacting with so many different people all at once that as soon like whenever you're hanging out with people in person, you get this transitionary period where you're like, okay, bye, but you take like 10, 20 or an hour like to say goodbye. But like whenever I log off, I'm just off, and then I'm alone by myself. So especially after talking about such like a serious topic, I really wanted to have somebody there just to sort of as a debriefing. So thank you guys for being there for me. It's really made it more possible for me to do this stream today, so thank you. um and you've definitely helped me in grieving by letting me know that you're here to listen and understand. And as far as helping people grieve, understanding that everyone grieves differently and for different lengths of time, just keeping that in mind, offering to help in practical ways, maintaining support after the funeral, knowing that they may have extreme emotions or behavior like lashing out or crying, and that they need reassurance that what they're feeling is normal. Um, all of these are ways that you could help people that you know are grieving. It can take 18 to 24 months, more or less. Not just saying that to give you sort of an expectation of what it might look like in the future. I'm gonna check the chat now. Did I do an alright job? Yes, Louie, you did an amazing job. I did a pretty good job of crying openly, no matter how awkward everyone found it, which helped me a lot. I'm glad, and I don't see why anyone would find it awkward. I mean, if they do, like, that's on them. Like, you're allowed to experience what you feel. And you know, if other people make you feel bad for expressing emotions, I don't know if maybe they've gone through their own trauma of being restricted from showing emotions, but there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm glad that you were able to express that freely, because that's so important. So important in being able to grieve in a healthy way. Um, Thank you so much for doing this, Shorty Pop. It's not easy, and this created a space for us to talk about it. Seeing other people cry helped me connect with my own emotions. Usually that's what helped me cry. I'm really, really glad that this was so helpful to you guys. Thank you, Shorty Pop, for talking about this. You're a trooper for getting through this. Thank you. Um, a few last words, actually. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming today, for being a part of this, for being here for each other. I took a long break from streaming because of the amount of time and effort I was putting into these became overwhelming, and I've now found myself like having trouble to get the motivation, but getting through writing this was difficult. I stopped and cried so many fucking times. Like, I literally would stop and be like, I can't write anymore about this. I have to go do something else. It was so hard. Um, but it helped me tremendously, and I really hope this helped you guys too. Um, how did you guys feel about the stream today? I uh I really liked what you guys had to say, and it was very validating, and especially talking about the different types of grief that were abnormal, hearing that you guys, quote unquote abnormal, but seeing just how commonplace it is, and us being able to openly talk about, yes, I've experienced this, and maybe I felt alone in experiencing this at first, but now we see, okay, like, we're not alone in this. Being even talking about how I felt angry whenever I first found out, or felt like somebody would lie about it, you know, you guys saying, "Hey, I felt the same way." That was really validating for me. And it feels good to get something out of streaming it. Like I know I wrote it, but like getting to interact with you guys have been a huge help and I really appreciate it. It was nice to hear. Oh, oh, I'm getting several messages. Johnny Gamble says, "Thank you for this. It was helpful to be able to talk about this with all of you." You're welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, "It was nice to hear everyone's thoughts and talk about something. It kind of felt like I was alone in struggling with this, but I'm really glad you organized this." Thank you so much. I'm really glad that yeah, I I was so fucking nervous for this because, like, I knew Beth also told a lot of people, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I was scared of where the view count was gonna go because I was like, if, like, a shit ton of people are watching this, I'm gonna have such bad anxiety. Or, like, if I was crying a lot and the view count went down, I was just like, oh no, I'm crying too much. So that was like, I don't know, it was kind of funny. So, like, on my end of things, like, thinking about that, but and then I also big shout out to Louie for talking to me before this because I was like hella anxious. So I'm so glad that it went as well as it did, and I'm really glad that you guys enjoyed it as much as you have, and that it helped. Uh, Louis the Claw says, "This was a powerful stream. It gave me a chance to reflect on Aaron's passing now that a little time has passed. Hearing how a lot of others went through similar emotional journeys was validating." I'm glad um, that helped. And yeah, it's like even after a couple months after this has happened, it's like being able to. It doesn't mean that the hurt is over, you know? So being able to still have these sort of things where we can talk about it, it's nice. Um, Sapphire Nightmare Blade says, "No golden bullets for solving my problems, but that's life." I don't think I've ever heard that expression before. Golden bullets. I'm Googling that. What does the expression golden bullets mean? Um, oh, okay. It just says 5 informal, very successful or destined for success. That isn't even a sentence. What? Okay, anyway. um, as in a single thing that resolves the issue by itself. Oh, thank you. You have done a better job than Google. um, but yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's not a simple thing. There's nothing that's just like, oh, okay, the paint's gone, it's okay. There's nothing that's gonna be like that. But you know, you have your moments where you feel good. You have your moments where you can maybe um maybe you have moments where you're not thinking about it, and then you have moments where it hits you and it's harder. You have moments where, you know, I like having the moments where I think of fun memories I had with Aaron and I can laugh about them. Um well, I think that's about all I have for you guys. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Um you guys can feel free to hang out in the chat after I'm gone, but I'm going to hop off. Uh thank you guys again. Appreciate you all. Punching out. See ya.